Just as I wish the day is beautiful. Evening, the Higurashi crying. My grandfather, having dressed formally, paced around his study nervously. I'm also in a beautiful dress. I've only worn it once before at my piano recital. But I'm not nervous like my grandfather. His silly nervousness actually relaxes me. Are they here yet? Grandfather looked out at the window. Then a black car stopped in front of the gate. Back then, a car was a luxury item. I don't think I had even one classmate whose family owned a car. Maybe a bicycle, but not a car. So it only makes sense that the men coming out of the car look respectable. Grandfather and I ran out to welcome them. Welcome, I'm Takano. Thank you for coming today. May I take your jacket? I relieved them and filed a role we decided ahead of time. Though my being relaxed by my grandfather's silliness ended at that point. Both my grandfather and I were stiff with anxiety as we greeted them now that the moment was here. Nice to meet you, Doctor, and hello, young lady. Are you his granddaughter? Yes, Miyo, please say hello. Wait, no. Oh, no. I got that wrong, didn't I? Yes, Miyo, please say hello. Very nice to meet you, I'm Miyo Takano. What a good girl. I'm here in place of Koizumi sensei. Soin came up and he can't make it today. He's very sorry. I see. I'm sorry to hear that. The person who set up everything isn't here. My grandfather even had his treasured wine ready, just as they promised 2 weeks ago. I mean, what a letdown, man. It's like seeing that Koizumi guy seemed very close to Takano. Seemed close friends. That scene where he, was talking to Miyo and, pretty much back to completely at that point, must have, had a lot of regrets for many years until he could finally tell, Miyo about it and, finally, help funding the research, I suppose. Everyone, let me introduce you. This is Dr. Hifumi Takano. Dr. Takano was a leading member of the Research Center for the Prevention of Epidemics in Manchuria during the war. He made many advances in developing synthetic food and synthetic alcohol as measures against malnutrition and ration shortages. Nice to meet you. Pleasure to meet you. Don't know who's talking, but thank you for having me. The men are even older than my grandfather. They take off their hats one at a time to greet him. Their beards, expensive-looking canes, and glasses tell me they are very high up in the society. They're probably the ones who have to wait until they died, so they'd be like, okay, now the research can go ahead. Grandfather bows to each one of them. Everyone, please come into the study. Please excuse the mess. Come in. Miyo, serve tea for everyone. Yes. Oh, hi, that's how it would be in Japanese, hi. I wasn't nervous at all earlier, but now I think I'm the most nervous one. I'm not the one making the presentation, and I'm not the one being evaluated, so it's ridiculous that I'm feeling so nervous. Don't know if I should use that as my excuse. I was so nervous that I knocked over the thermos I had filled to the brim with hot water and ruined the black tea I'd chosen specifically for this day. I apologized to my grandfather and started to boil water again. Just need enough for the guests. By the time I had cups of tea and cookies ready, grandfather's presentation was at its key part. It pierces the blood of lymph vessels and spreads to the spinal cord, and from there it travels along the cerebrospinal fluids to the brain. I've confirmed many cases of encephalitis after autopsies. I probably butchered to the pronunciation. God damn, these medical words are fucking hard to fucking read. Eosinophilic encephalitis is known to be caused by roundworm, and we predict its behavior to be extremely similar. How much of a clusterfuck does that look like in Japanese? Probably looks even, probably Don't forget I said anything. Jesus Christ, look at those kanji characters. That's so many in a row. It's like if you just saw this and none of the hiragana, you'd be like, wait, is this in Japanese or Chinese? I mean, that's one way I could tell the difference between Chinese and Japanese. I mean, kanji characters are basically Chinese characters after all. But you know, Chinese, they just have those characters. They don't have, you know, hiragana or anything like that, like Japanese. So that kind of stands out in Japanese. So be like, okay, that's definitely in Japanese. If you just see nothing but kanji characters, like, that's definitely gotta be Chinese then. It's confusing. Well, not really, because, you know, if you see any hiragana or katakana mixed in, then you know it's Japanese. If not, it's probably Chinese. Grandfather said, walking between samples in formalin jars and pointing to several as he gave his explanation. There are over 100 formalin jars in here with parts of brains in them. They were all very dusty, so I spent a few days cleaning them. Even and opened up, and it's like, brush the brain there. I'm rather proud to see the sparkling jars all lined up like this. However, roundworms induce an extremely wide range of symptoms. Headache, narcosis, derangement. None of those are characteristic symptoms of roundworms. On the other hand, symptoms of Hinamizawa are very specific to that disease. You're saying one of them is to claw out one's own throat, yes? Exactly. Some soldiers witnessed it just before their fellows died. Such self-mutilation was never seen before in any disease. It only occurs in Hinamizawa syndrome. Also, since that symptom was only seen with terminal stage patients, I believe that's a means of exodus, something we've seen before in several parasites. Parasites mature inside of an organism, reproduce, and leave their host and look for the next one. So what do you think about the fact that the cases were only seen in the soldiers from Hinamizawa, even though all the soldiers touched their blood, which must have been full of parasitic eggs or larvae? My throat. Hope this scene doesn't go on too long because I need a drink. Don't you think there was a possibility of them getting infected? I suspected things like an incubation period, but since it was limited to people from the Hinamizawa region, I believe something such as the unique local climate must play a role. I'll talk about that in the next part, but the ancient indigenous beliefs of Hinamizawa have. That can't be possible, Dr. Takano. I've never heard of parasites behaving socially. Yes, well, that is one of the revolutionary discoveries in Hinamizawa syndrome. The elderly gentleman mumbled to each other while pointing at the data. With that, I finally realized things aren't going too well. Dr. Takano, I've been reviewing your data while listening to your gracious presentation. First of all, it is simply impossible for parasites to control human minds. Human thoughts are controlled by the brain, which is a work of art created by God. Furthermore, ideology is an extremely advanced aspect of human thought. It's an advanced capability bestowed only to humans on this planet. Yet you would say parasites intervene in that. Please, that's absurd. I mean, who are these people? It's like, oh yeah, you know, medical research. It's like, no, that's impossible. The mind, the brain was a creation, a work of art by God. It's just like, what? Can we just talk medically? It's like the potential of a parasite is like, no, it's preposterous. I agree. Ideology can also be considered a matter of thought that prioritizes the whole of the individual. In other words, that's the most important required condition for society. God damn, my throat. There's no way parasites would be gifted with that, when their only demand is to pass on their genes. In the field of biology, there was never once been a discovery of sociality or sociality in parasites. But there are cases of parasites interfering with the host's behavior. You're misunderstanding one thing, Dr. Takano. Perhaps you need a drink. Because fuck it out, I need a drink, so I'll be right back. It's like, that's how you come back after that. You're misunderstanding one thing, Dr. Takano. The principle that drives parasites capable of controlling their host is always reproduction and propagation. It's only that primitive concept. Even an example you used before, the rat infected with Tocoplasm gondii hallucinates aversion to cats. The altered behavior is simply a means to let their host be eaten by a better host in order to change hosts. That's just like a grasshopper infected with a horsehair worm drowning itself. Once a horsehair worm matures, it becomes aquatic. When that happens, it guides a grasshopper to the water and drowns it. Then enters the environment it's adapted for. Exactly, the suicidal act of clawing out one's throat corresponds to that in the case of Hinamizawa syndrome. For example, guinea worms escape the body by having the host scratch the affected area. Indeed, the purpose of all these parasites is reproduction. If them infest the brain, God's masterpiece. No, infecting the brain itself isn't that strange. To say they infested and influence human ideology is frankly delusional. In fact, that's a dangerous idea and I need a drink. This soundtrack, that's the soundtrack in my throat right now. It's like, I don't think it's that strange that Hinamizawa, an isolated culture, developed its own unique faith. There are actually many examples of that all over Japan. So are you saying all of them were due to parasites? Or that they were all due to cultural reasons, except the one in Hinamizawa, which was caused by parasites? How do you establish a distinction? Well, as I said in my autopsies on Hinamizawa soldiers who died in the war, there was sufficient evidence to believe... Excuse me, Dr. Takano. I don't think you have gathered enough case studies to call it clinical data. Furthermore, as you said, it was during the war. No, I mean, as I explained in the next part, Hinamizawa syndrome develops when one experiences suspicion, nervousness, stress, and becomes emotionally unbalanced. I think it's a unique approach to suspect some manner of commonality. If there were several cases of unique and bizarre self-mutilation, such as clawing out one's throat. Yet, that's all the more reason it's unreliable. Maybe it was just coincidence that such rare cases happened under abnormal circumstances like the war. I believe you witnessed the convergence of coincidences, trapped in a gustless view, deluded yourself into finding a pattern. To prove otherwise, you would need an enormous amount of clinical data on Hinamizawa syndrome patients. Perfectly, that's impossible to prove. Lady's acts of recognizing it as a curse suggests it's more within the realm of culture-bound symptoms. And you think that it is a delusional parasitic disease. I hate to say it, but I think you admire the beliefs of the Hinamizawans a little too much, and as a result, you yourself have been taken in by their culture-bound reactive syndrome. Actually, that happens quite often with people who research more unusual fields of study. We're trying to be careful ourselves. The more they talk, the paler my grandfather's face becomes. I was just stunned myself. We've never heard a parasite like that. That's impossible. Just coincidence, and there's enough data. Talk goes on, and every time grandfather says something, they dismiss it like that. Before he knew it, my grandfather could only hold his silence before their criticisms. Well, notice, revolutionary discovery is accepted at first. Maybe this research of yours is one of those things. Even if it's ridiculed at first, it may achieve recognition in later years. That happens all the time. I'm just an amateur. I'm just a private researcher who didn't graduate from an elite college. Nor do I belong to any academic clique. I don't have any connections with experts or research centers. That's why this is all I can do. Is the Hinamizawa syndrome real? Or is it just my delusion, just like you all say it is? To find out, I need your help. What I need is a drink. Man, why do I do such a long record sessions? No wonder my throat is like, ugh. Of course, if this was the discovery of the century, it would create a major uproar. After all, you're suggesting that human culture and ideology is all the will of parasites. Our frontal lobe is a place for them to live. What an audacious theory. If a link between the existence of the Hinamizawa syndrome and a disease carrier's belief in Oyashir Sama could be established, it would be possible to explain all religions. No, all cultural divisions on Earth. What a magnificent and unique idea. Dr. Takano, instead of showing people like us your essays in secret, you should publish a book about it for the general public. Grandfather looks at the ground, his fists trembling a little. But their words were far too cruel. I don't know anything about academics, I'm just a little girl. I don't know exactly what they're talking about, but Grandfather worked so hard by himself until today. But to prove his research and delve further into it, he needs sponsors. Yet those sponsors are casting him away, calling his research a delusion. That's outrageous. Like asking which came first, the chicken or the egg. Besides, if his research was at the level those cheeky men want to see, he wouldn't need their help. And you know, it's kind of fitting in a way, because one of them was just say, yeah, maybe your researcher will become one of those where it's like, later on gets evaluated, and it's like, okay, got a point there. He wouldn't need the help. Besides, if research was at that level those cheeky men want to see, he wouldn't need the help. They're saying that they can't help him unless they see some results that are beyond the level of private research. I mean, you know, maybe if he did publish a book, that would possibly lead to someone showing interest and be like, I'll fund your research. Any field doesn't research always start out with just a little idea? If you can prove its existence beforehand, then what's the point of researching it to begin with? Well, if you can prove its existence, then researching, everything else around it, it's like, there's still that. That'd be like, we've just discovered this new species, and that's all, we're not going to study it any further. If a wild idea can't be the subject of research, how did we gain any knowledge at all? But never mind that. When Mr. Koizumi came 2 weeks ago, didn't he say they were really interested in his research? What's going on? This is the complete opposite of what he said. Yes, I think this is very interesting research. The human brain still holds many secrets. Dr. Takano's idea is an extremely unique one. It seems impossible to ignore, especially from a eugenics perspective. Humans are not God's children. We're simply animals who underwent the baptism of evolution. Such, according to Darwin, there will be differences in that evolution based on environments. In other words, humans can be either superior or inferior. As a nation, we must think how we can maintain good bloodlines and how we can leave good genes behind. Wait, what? If we do not raise that as a national policy and research towards it, then by the next century, mankind may fall to a fatal position on the hierarchy. I need a freaking drink every few fucking minutes. I've freaking drank half of that freaking bottle of water already. Dr. Takano's research has the potential of encompassing more than just parasitic diseases. The evil inferior humans we shouldn't let breed can actually be explained by disease instead of genetics. Then it becomes possible to correct their behavior through surgery. So we can leave wonderful people for our future. From the eugenic point of view, Dr. Takano's research should get started immediately. It's possible it could be the greatest discovery since his invention of the lobotomy. Wait, what? That wasn't a great invention at all. If causality between infectious diseases and an individual's nature could be established, this would be more than Nobel Prize worthy. Or maybe this was around about the time where, that was still, seen as a success, and then later on they were like, yeah, that was a bad idea, because that didn't actually fix the problem at all. I mean, it did in a sense, but it pretty much made people into vegetables. Koizumi-sensei, thank you for giving us this chance. Dr. Kun is a single-minded and passionate man, but he's not good at dealing with people. He's been working on his research all by himself, but now he's hit the limit of what one person can do and he needs help. Please everyone listen to what Takano Kun has to say. Is this from the point of view of Koizumi when he was getting these people to go listen to what he has to say? Oh, you don't even need to ask, Sensei. We are the ones who should be thanking you for this opportunity. We're already willing to help him. In fact, the more urgent matter will be arranging jurisdictions within society. I would like to thank you for giving me an opportunity to be involved in such a unique research project at this age. There was a knock on the door, and the sliding door opened, and the owner peeked in. Excuse me, there's someone asking for you. May I bring him? Someone, who could it be? Then I whispered into Koizumi's ear, and his face turned pale all of a sudden. Please let him in. No. I'll come greet him with you. As Koizumi stood up, 2 pairs of footsteps reached the door. Sensei, I didn't expect you to be here. Koizumi-kun, long time no see. I have something I need to tell you today. So this is how it played out then. This was Koizumi was all for helping him out, but then he's like, no, we can't have this, going on, man. Because we don't want this shit to get out. That might have been what caused that incident in the war. Yes. If you need to tell me something, I'm all ears. Please go ahead. The old man known as Koizumi was not someone whose status could be taken lightly. Though he had retired, he was still powerful enough to wield great influence as a fixer. So from his meek attitude, it was easy to figure out what kind of person this man must be. The old man held on to his bodyguard's shoulders as he walked. He had an expensive-looking cane in his other hand. He couldn't even walk on his own because of his old age, but his intense, commanding presence hadn't declined one bit. I'll get straight to the point. Your friend's research. You need to put a stop to that. Huh? What do you mean? Koizumi-kun, he must take his knowledge of Hinamizawa to his grave. Nobody should doubt it. God damn it. If anybody looks into it, well, if you poke a bush, a snake will come out. A big fat snake, too. It would pain me to just watch you get swallowed by it. That's why I'm here to give you some advice. Can your friends wait for a little? So how about it? Do you want to have some drinks to me in a different room? Yes, I'll come with you straight away. Koizumi realized that he was being pressured. He didn't know which direction it was coming from, but clearly some authorities weren't comfortable with the research on Hinamizawa syndrome and trying to stop him from supporting it. Koizumi-kun, do you remember the Marco Polo bridge incident? This is utter nonsense. We came here today expecting to hear a more objective side. Normally we wouldn't come all the way here for something like this, but since Koizumi asked us, we didn't have a choice. This really was a waste of time, but in a way it was a good thing we came. We were able to give you some advice. You should take up bonsai instead of wasting the rest of your life on this. Bonsais are great. Bonsai! I agree. It's not healthy to just stare at formalin jars in a study. But it sure is a unique subject. If you want, I'll introduce you to the chief of a publishing company. The general public loves things like this, you know. They're not even trying to hide their hostility. They're laughing at my grandfather, denouncing him and saying things to degenerate not only his research, but his personality as well. I probably pronounced that wrong, did I? If they are simply trying to provoke him, any response would just be giving them what they want. Even this very moment, grandfather tried to remain a noble researcher and a proud human being. He's no longer trembling. On the contrary, he apologized to them for taking their time. Up to the time and told him he had no intention of keeping them any longer. That's tragic. We'll give this article back to you, though it'd be so much easier if we could actually call it an article. When the elderly gentleman tossed it back to him, grandfather couldn't catch it in time. The article he worked so hard on fell onto the floor. The paper scattered all onto the carpet. I mean, you can see now why Takano, Miyo Takano, was so, determined to make her grandfather's life work, come true. Because these assholes were, pressured and all that. It's like, no, we will not take you seriously at all. The elderly gentleman left the study without even apologizing for it. Everyone else followed suit. As they left, they trod all over my grandfather's article. Looked like grandfather's expression didn't change, but I could see it warping. I could see the wall of research grandfather bore crunching and warping sadly. I jumped. I grabbed onto the elderly gentleman's leg. I don't hate him. If I were asked if I hated him or not, the answer would be yes, but that's not the point here. What I really can't stand is this foot stepping all over my grandfather's article. Don't step on it! Don't step on it! Grandpa worked so hard on it, don't step on it! I just want to move the foot that's standing on his papers. But the foot doesn't move no matter how hard I push or pull, as if it's rooted to the floor. Well, someone grabbed me from behind. It was my grandfather. Please excuse my granddaughter. Don't worry about this. We'll clean it up. Don't step on them. I tell you not to step on my grandfather's article. My screams don't mean a thing to them. They completely ignored my screams. They continued to step on the papers and left the study. Fucking assholes. Only my grandfather and I remain in there now. My grandfather is still grabbing the back of my collar. I don't have any words left to say, only cries. My grandfather is determined not to show any emotion. He doesn't even open his mouth, so I have to cry for him. Just then my grandfather slapped me in the face. That startled me. I'm crying for him, so why did he slap me? Then I understood. Grandfather's the one who wants to cry, but he's enduring, so I shouldn't cry either. I wiped my eyes on my runny nose, then I silently turned my eyes to the papers on the carpet, just like my grandfather. Sorry, Miyo. I don't understand why he's apologizing. I thought he was going to complain about their rudeness. If I'd worked harder, this wouldn't have happened. Until today. You helped me so much. It was all for nothing. Sorry about that. How courageous he is. Even after that disaster, he's still concerned about me. I shook my head and put my hands on the floor. I tried to gather up the papers, but then they began to fall. My tears are overflowing again, blurring the ink on the papers. These are all handwritten by grandfather. He was so happy that finally there was someone who understood his research. He was so happy. He spent all night writing these. They stepped on them. They might as well have stepped on my grandfather's very soul. I didn't work hard enough. If I had done more, this wouldn't have happened. Sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll work even harder. I won't give up because of something like this. I don't know if he's saying that to me or to himself. Don't worry, God is watching. I have to believe that I'll gain recognition. That day will come. That's why I have to keep working harder. My father says that all the time, but I know the truth. God only plays for people's fate. He doesn't save anyone out of goodwill. That's why he let this happen to my grandfather, even though he's worked so hard and so humbly until today. That's why he let such a horrible thing happen to me when I was still an innocent little girl. Grandfather keeps repeating himself, but I know the truth. God exists. The existence grandfather believes in is real, but there's no mercy to be found in God. He delivers unreasonable fates and makes us call it a challenge. I can't tell my grandfather that, of course. I ask God once more, like I did on the day of the thunderstorm. Why? Why? It's been an hour, 55 minutes. My throat is like, ugh. And we haven't even had the word of the day. You know what? No. Why would... You know what is why in Japanese? I forget. Word of the day. Doshite means why, but let's think of some other word. How about tragic? I feel like I've already had tragic as a word of the day in one of these playthroughs. Oh wait, no I haven't, because tragic isn't in the dictionary. How about... Actually, let's go for that. Maybe that's in here. No, research isn't in here, so let's go with... where is it? Pretty sure I've had this as a word of the day as well before. This is the very first word in the S section as well. Kanashi, sad. Because that is... I mean, what a roller coaster this record session has been. Went from like Takano, you know, almost pretty much dying in that orphanage because of the extreme punishments, to being stayed by a grandfather and to her grandfather's research literally being trampled on because like Koizumi was pressured to not, you know, fund the research, get it anywhere off the ground because of the Marco Polo thing. But yeah, see the rest of this scene. Maybe this is the last of the scene. The next part start out like, why? Actually, you know what? Why can't you give my grandfather's efforts and hard work the recognition it deserves? Grandfather told me that he'll gather up the papers, so I should put away the teacups. I would silently put the teacups that hadn't even been touched onto the serving cart. So I pushed it out of the study. Grandfather told me. He told me to close the door after I leave. I always close the door when I leave. He doesn't need to remind me. But that's what he wants, so without saying anything, I close the door. And you know what? The recording's just going to stop randomly if I don't, you know, wrap it up here, because it's got like an hour 59 minutes, which has just gone to, so it got 50 odd seconds. I'll wrap this part up with, because, you know, otherwise it stops the recording and I'd have to record again, which would be completely pointless because this is just wrapping up the record session here. So with that, I shall see you next time, viewers. See you next time.